as the genocide in Gaza continues, as Israel attempts to expand into Syria, we have Yemen's naval blockade in the Red Sea bearing much fruit. The Eilat port in Israel, the only Red Sea port, is about to close. It has been essentially bankrupt for many months, if not over a year now, since the November 2023 blockade launched by Yemen's Ansar Allah. We also have recent reports that Ben Gurion Airport, because of Yemen's consistent missile strikes, terminating service. Where do you see the state of things right now? Because of course, all of this centers on the genocide in Gaza, especially Yemen's, what still is a very heroic response that isn't stopping despite Israel's attempt to expand everywhere with U.S. backing.
Well, starting with the Yemeni strikes on the port of Eilat, the Israeli port, that's this not it's been going on for a while, and as you mentioned, Danny, it's destroyed the economy of that. That's the third. Ashdod and Haifa, the other two main ports, are receiving shipments and deploying from the Mediterranean coast. This is an important port because it brings things in from Asia. So, and we're talking about a lot of resources that they wouldn't be getting from elsewhere, stuff to do with agriculture and things like that. So it is really important for the Israeli infrastructure and economy. It's down 90% since hostilities began, since Ansar Allah started targeting it. And now Eilat's asking the Israeli government for a bailout. So, they're going to require a bailout just to basically stay operational and do essential maintenance to make the place functional so that if they come back online, they'll be able to do so. If they don't, it could get decrepit very quickly and fall into disrepair and all sorts of problems that would delay it coming back online later. Bottom line, it's a massive blow to the Israeli economy, and it's interesting because Iran targeted the port of Haifa and did so, very effectively, and so answer a lot. So I don't believe there's any coordination per se. Not officially anyway, command and control coordination of the so-called axis of resistance. But you can see, because this port is within range of what Ansar Allah can do accurately, and perhaps better chance of it not getting shot down by anybody else in between, including Saudi Arabia or the United States. So, but they're doing the thing that, they're making it. This is also a huge crisis for the insurance industry. And that's one thing Yemen has done with the interdicting and denying shipping through the Bab el-Mandeb and the Red Sea, and then with the Eilat port. It's a nightmare. So insurance, reinsurance, these are all essential components to trading internationally. And right now, I don't think they can get insurance, and who's going to insure anything out of this port as well. So it's from that point of view, in terms of some kind of military stroke economic intervention to try to make life uncomfortable for the Israelis, Yemen has done more than anybody proportionally on the planet. I mean, it's extraordinary that no one else could step up and do what they have done in terms of making an impact. Obviously, they paid a price for it in terms of U.S. strikes and Israeli strikes, but it hasn't deterred them. They're very determined. They're an example, I think, because they said we're enforcing the Genocide Convention, because it does fall upon, it's incumbent upon countries that are signatories to take action, to BDS or military intervention if necessary, and that's what they're doing. So it kind of puts everybody else to shame, really. And I wish there was other countries that could follow suit. The Hague group that met in Bogota, they are making the right noises. We can talk about that later, but nobody's done what Yemen has done.
So successfully too, Dan. What is your take and analysis on this?
No, I agree with Patrick. I mean, honestly, I think the world needs to be humbled in the face of what Yemen has done. They have basically destroyed Israel's ability to trade. Because, as Patrick said, when they've shut down the port of Eilat. And then Iran has effectively shut down the port of Haifa. Both Iran and Yemen have shut down Ben Gurion Airport for the most part. There's very little ways to get, economic traffic in and out of Israel now, except maybe through Jordan. Again, I think Yemen has done more than any country in the world to fight this genocide, even though Yemen is perhaps, if not the poorest country in the world, it ranks up there, right? And let's remember also that Yemen has been the subject of a brutal war, U.S.-backed Saudi war against it since 2015, which brought the country close to famine, if not over the edge of famine, caused tens of thousands of deaths, and yet somehow it has found the wherewithal to defend Gaza. I wish other countries would step up in such a way. I mean, you have to give Iran credit because also they're supporting Yemen. I don't know how much, but I think, in a significant fashion. And again, Iran's attack on Haifa certainly aided the effort against the genocide. But Yemen, I guess, to me, is the most valuable player in this fight against genocide.
Since November 2023, we've seen this blockade in the Red Sea continue, and it stopped for a time during the first Trump-brokered ceasefire. We haven't had another one since, of course. It was a very brief pause. We talked about the Hague Group, and you mentioned that it was over a dozen countries coming together. The conclusions for the Hague Group were a little more softer than how Ansar Allah is reacting. How would you compare the two?
No, definitely. I think the Hague Group is long overdue. And some of these are what would be regarded as, second or third tier countries in terms of their size. And it's definitely, to me, a global South led effort. And there you see them on screen there. But the point is, it's quite risky. You get together and you conspire to levy sanctions against a country like Israel. Expect dirty tricks at the UN and everywhere else. And the United States will then probably retaliate with punitive tariffs against all of these governments for, hurting their ally. And that's supposedly a violation or against their U.S. national interests. So Israel's national interests are America's national interests by extension. But in terms of our arms embargoes and things like this, it should have been done a long time ago. My frustration with this is that there are mechanisms at the UN General Assembly level, like the Uniting for Peace resolution, where they could get together and bypass the UN Security Council, and they have a number of tools at their disposal once that consensus is reached, including UN General Assembly mandated sanctions. First and foremost, suspending Israel from the United Nations. I mean, that's number one. That should have happened already, especially with the threats and the belligerent behavior in the UN and the fact that they've completely ignored the ICJ's prohibition from the initial preliminary ruling back in early 2024. So that already there's a case to suspend Israel from the UN. That's a no-brainer. That would be the most important step. And then sanctions. A country the size of Israel, it doesn't take much in terms of sanctioning to really put heavy pressure, and people will feel it there. And in some ways, it could be even more devastating than Iran's missile attacks in terms of public approval of how the government's dealing with this situation. They've been allowed to basically escape that. And to me, this is the most frustrating thing, because that's supposedly a painless way that countries can act to try to restrain Israel without getting involved militarily, in the vein of ending South African apartheid, etc. But it's not happening. And yet, at the same time, the United States is just sanctioning people left, right, and center with the intent of hurting them. They're even ready to sanction their allies. the United States. And they're doing that with Russia with secondary sanctions against anybody trading with Russia. And that's going to be interesting to see how that is actually going to pan out and what that's going to actually mean. We can discuss that later. But I like what the Bogota meeting is about. But, even a country like Brazil, they're in a perfect position to do something like this and just go full on embargo, everything, trade, military equipment, the whole lot. And if a few countries did that, it would embolden others to follow. So hopefully something comes out of this.
One thing that definitely jumps out when we look at how Yemen has responded with, using whatever firepower they have to prevent shipping in the Red Sea. But also Yemen has had to face, as Patrick said, the brunt of U.S. aggression as well, multiple times being bombed by the United States and the United Kingdom. And here we have a situation where the U.S. isn't even named. That was probably one of the biggest things for me is when we talk about Israel and stopping the arms, for example, is one of their big demands right here. Prevent the provision of transfer of arms, munitions, military fuel, and related military equipment and dual-use items to Israel. Dan, I think about the United States. Your thoughts?
No, I agree. I mean, first of all, there's a few things that jump out at me. One is that, at least the reports I read, is that 32 different states went to the conference in Bogota, but only 12 signed up for this 6-point declaration. And the 12 states that signed up, a lot of them, if not all, outside of Indonesia, truthfully, what they plan to do or not to do is not going to impact Israel very much. These are smaller countries, a number of which are Latin America, that don't do much trading with Israel to begin with. So what are they, what does it really mean for them to have an arms embargo against Israel or a trade embargo, or to prevent shipping? Shipping, as you say, from where to where, if you're in the Atlantic side in Latin America, or if you're landlocked in Latin America, for that matter. Even Indonesia, which is, it's the 4th largest country in the world population-wise, big economy, but it's in the Pacific Ocean. What's it going to do? So in the end, I feel like the two things they could have done to have an impact, they didn't do. One, as Patrick said, they could have passed a declaration that they would move at the United Nations General Assembly for a Uniting for Peace resolution. And that would be a resolution to do an end around the Security Council, say, because of this genocide in Gaza, we're going to vote on and hopefully pass a resolution to order very serious measures against Israel, up to and including sending armed forces, peacekeepers, to defend the people of Palestine. That is the biggest thing and most important thing these countries could have done. The second thing they could have done, which they didn't do, is say, we're going to bring aid to Gaza, right? We're going to have flotillas that we're going to send to Gaza with humanitarian aid, with the assumption that, one, Israel probably would not attack, vessels from 12 different states. And even if they did, then that would set up, frankly, the right to then attack Israel. So that would satisfy the first goal of having more intervention to protect the Palestinians. Again, they didn't do that. So most of the things, or if not all of the things that they say they're going to do, they don't really have the power to do. They don't have the power. Again, if you're a Latin American country on the Caribbean or Atlantic, what are you going to do to stop trade with Israel, to prevent arms from going there? Most of these countries don't even have navies, right? They really can't do it. So in the end, I feel like what they've agreed to do is symbolic. And given that we're now, you know, quickly approaching 2 years of this genocide. And given the fact that people are starving now and dying now, I feel like this is the type of declaration that should have come out about a year and a half ago. That's my feeling. That's my feeling.
I mean, the statistics are the data just of what's happening to the Palestinian people. We won't even call it that, but like what's happening to Palestinians. The UN-backed Global Protection Cluster said that in a report that they've conducted, 10 children a day are losing their limbs alone, let alone all of the people dying, both children and, of course, adults. And this is an image of Syria's government institutions being bombed by Israel as a reporter is giving the news. I put this up to show that Israel is unrestrained. Yemen is right now one of the few countries doing anything concrete, especially on both the military and the aid front.
Well, there's a lot going on there. I mean, Israel attacking Damascus just a couple of days ago. That throws a whole new spanner into a mess that, you know, quite frankly, there's already too much going on in the Middle East. But let's just pivot to the Syria issue real quick, because it's important to understand what's going on here. So what you're seeing here is a very theatrical, staged, managed conflict now, or argument, you could say, between Damascus and Tel Aviv. So it's what they've done, what Israel's objective has been from the beginning, including the installation of the terrorist junta in Damascus, the Jolani regime. The intention from the beginning, in fact, they've been trying to do this for 15 years, which is to change the regime in Damascus and then begin the balkanization of Syria, with the expressed goal to break Syria up into smaller pieces. And the key piece for the United States and Israel at the moment, the key piece is the strip extending from the Golan Heights along the Jordanian border to Al Tanf, where coincidentally, surprise, surprise, the United States have been entrenched, building up a military presence there for many years, since 2017, and then right up to the Kurdish-held area in northeastern Syria. And this is what many are referring to as the David Corridor, okay? But the problem is it goes through the Druze-held area in southern Syria. So what cleverly, and you have to give Israel and the United States credit for being devilishly evil, and they are 5 steps ahead, unfortunately, of the Arabs, who are divided. And that's been the intention from the beginning. That's the whole object of the game, is to always keep the Arabs and their different factions from a sectarian point of view, from a religious point of view, who they allied with, who they're pro-U.S., anti-U.S., pro-Israel, anti-Israel, is to keep them divided, and so that they can't unite. Because now you can see what the results are of being disparate and disunited. And what they've cleverly done is they have played. And if Jolani was Eli Cohen, then he's playing his role perfectly. Okay, so what they've done is they've created a situation. The first step was when Israel invaded the Golan Heights. Immediately when Jolani came in Christmas of 2024, Israel moved straight away into the Golan Heights before they took out all this Syrian military establishments. Then once they've done that, then they started kind of, in a way, antagonizing, threatening some of the Druze in that area along that part, and then that also got back to Sweda, where they were like feeling insecure, because at the same time Jolani's thugs were threatening to kind of impede on their Druze-held enclave in the south. So Israel and Jolani created tension there, and the United States is also part of this as well. They created tension there, and so then the United States and Israel, I am sure, told Jolani, it seems like it anyway, you need to help to disarm the Druze. You need to disarm the Druze. And so they moved in, and then last week we saw clashes between Jolani's thugs from the General Security, even though he's denying that they're his. It's the joke. There's hardly a government in charge. But anyway, and then that created a sectarian explosion, which ignited there. And then, of course, then Israel moves in and says, "We'll protect you. We'll protect the Druze. We'll protect you." So it's like a protection racket. And so then Israel fired airstrikes into Damascus as a symbolic show of force to say, "Look, we're on your side." And then Jolani comes on the news and said, "Oh well, we are the Israelis. We don't support the Israelis. They are a source of the instability in this region." This is a guy who wanted to normalize relations with Netanyahu just a couple weeks ago. So don't believe anything these people tell you officially. You are looking at a World Wrestling Federation choreographed fight, okay? And the result is to try to get the Druze to beg for the Israelis' support. Yeah. And half the Druze aren't buying this. But so they're going to cut that strip because that's the runway for an attack on Iran. Right into Iraqi Kurdistan, straight shot to Iran. But this is also going to be the mechanism by which the United States and Israel will ignite a sectarian civil war in Lebanon. Okay, yeah. They're working on peeling away Tripoli, the Druze enclave in Lebanon, and to put pressure on Hezbollah because they won't disarm. So you're looking at a bloody sectarian civil war in Syria and Lebanon. This is a new Sykes-Picot by force drawn in blood. This is what the U.S. and Israel are doing right now. Tom Barak, Trump's special envoy, is absolutely lying through his teeth, saying, "Oh, we don't have a dog in this fight." Well, then why are you occupying 25% of Syria's landmass then? Why are you training and equipping HTS for last 15?
Yeah, they never left. The U.S. never.
Right.
So don't believe a word these people say. They are lying. They've got an agenda. It's to break up and balkanize Syria into little pieces, then Lebanon, and then Iraq after that. So this is a whole program.
It's so interesting. Israel spent so many years literally supporting the forces that came to power in Syria, December 2024. Now it is claiming that it is fighting these always Al-Qaeda, once Al-Qaeda types, and targeting what's left of the government institutions, which are essentially defunct anyway. And for weeks before this happened, there were reports about exactly what Patrick said, building up against Lebanon, attempting to invade from the border in order to weaken what already is a state that is very weak. And here you have a situation where outside of Iran, the biggest and most strongest forces in the axis of resistance that are giving Israel a lot of trouble are Yemen. Then you have Hamas and the Palestinian resistance, which has been fighting incredibly hard against Israel. How do you see this situation, Dan, overall? Where does this all fit?
Yeah, well, I agree with Patrick. I think the word of the day is balkanization. I do think the goal is to destroy Syria as a united country, which, of course, the West has done all around the world, right? With the former Yugoslavia, Libya, Iraq, Somalia, and now Syria. Well, Lebanon even before that. I mean, in many ways, Lebanon has just been completely crippled as a nation. Their military is under U.S. control. It doesn't really defend Lebanon. It's really up to Hezbollah to do that, but that's, of course, a non-state actor, which the West opposes. And now Syria is being balkanized. As Patrick said, the U.S. controls 25% to maybe a third of Syria, the most oil and grain-rich part. Israel continues to take more and more land in the south. Turkey's taken a bit in the north. It doesn't leave much. And it's very interesting. A report I read this morning is one theory is that in terms of what just happened with the Druze is that at least some in the Syrian government, such as it is, claimed that in Baku, when they were meeting with Israel, that they got a signal from Israel they could go into this area where the Druze are and take it over. The Druze have always had very much independence in this part of the country under Assad and his father. And they're claiming Israel gave them the green light to go in there, which they did. And then, of course, Israel said, oh, you shouldn't be in there. And they attacked Damascus. So either, as Patrick said, this was all choreographed, or Jelani's forces were kind of led into there in a way that, remember, Saddam Hussein was given the green light by the first Bush administration to go into Kuwait. And then when he did, of course, the U.S. went to war with Saddam Hussein for going into Kuwait. It looks a bit like that. But however that came about, the result is the same. In the end, Israel has used this HTS group, which is nothing but a rebranded al-Nusra Front of al-Qaeda, right, to overthrow Assad. But they have no loyalty to them. Israel, I mean, has no loyalty to this group. And their goal is to take over more and more of Syria, create greater Israel. And I think Jelani will be dispensed with at some point, just like Diem was in South Vietnam, just like Saddam Hussein, who was a CIA asset, was dispensed with in Iraq. This is how it goes. Be careful to be a quisling of the West. Right? You are utterly dispensable.